in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we're giving folks an opportunity to settle in, I guess we'll do a couple of preemptive sound checks before we really get going with the true council meeting. Someone from the Office of Broadband online, or perhaps Desi, if you're able to unmute, say a couple words, test 1, 2, so we can make sure the meeting owl is working correctly.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for confirming you can hear us as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Boysko to get us started.
Well, thank you so much, Chandler. It's nice to be here today at the Broadband Advisory Council meeting. If you would like to take the roll, and I know we have a lot of people who are online as well.
Yes, ma'am. The calling roll, Delegate Herring.
Here. Did you hear me? I'm sorry.
Hey, Chandler, I'm sorry, it's Desi. I think you were muted.
Yeah.
We're not muted in the room.
Now I can hear you. I didn't hear, after you called my name, I didn't hear anything else.
Well, this is why we do bug testing. So I'll continue to speak to the microphone. Desi, can you hear us well now?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Awesome. Well, we'll go back up to which one that we couldn't hear back from. Delegate Leftwich, are you online? Delegate Srinivasan.
I'm present. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Delegate Willett.
Here, good morning.
Morning. Senator Hashmi. Senator Hackworth. Steve Sandy.
Here.
Braylon Mura.
Here.
Casey Logan.
Here.
Casey. Thank you, Casey. Gotcha. Rich Schulman.
Here.
Jimmy Carr.
Here.
Christian Goodwin.
Here.
Christy Proctor.
Here.
Secretary Merrick or a designee. Secretary Merrick or a designee online.
Here.
Thank you. Secretary Lohr. Secretary Lohr or a designee online.
Beth Green for Secretary Lohr.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We will have public comment availability at the end of the meeting. You need to sign up if you wish to speak. Really appreciate Breezeline for organizing the breakfast for us and lunch and hosting us. It's really very kind of you all to open your doors for us. And also wanted to recognize David Sadler with Caroline County, who is here to speak to us today as well.
Good morning. My name is David Sadler. I'm the IT director here in Caroline County, as well as a proud member of the Broadband Advisory Committee for the county. On behalf of the Caroline County Board of Supervisors, I would like to welcome you to one of the most beautiful corners of Caroline County. Also, I'd like to take a minute to introduce Jason Jacobus, one of the members of our Broadband Advisory Committee, who has worked very hard to help us be a success in the undertaking that we've taken. Thanks to the hard work and the support of the Broadband Advisory Council, DHCD, and the Office of Broadband, the commitment from the Caroline County Board of Supervisors, and the stellar performance of two partners, both Verizon and Breezeline. Hopefully, by 2026, we will achieve our goal of having universal coverage. And this could not have been done without hard work from all the participants and support from you guys. So we do appreciate that. Again, welcome to Caroline County. We hope that your stay with us is nice and make yourself right at home. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the warm hospitality. The next item is we need to approve the minutes for 16th. And if there are any changes or corrections, please let us know.
Second.
Ready? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. All righty. Next, we will have our Director of DHCD, Brian Horn, and Tamara Holmes, our Director of Broadband, provide us with a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, members of the advisory council. I'm just going to be very brief and kind of give you a road map of where we're going to hear what we're going to hear today. You'll hear about a variety of topics by way of an update. Make ready the status of build out so far, and also BEAD, and including not just deployment, but also some non-deployment issues as well. So at this point, I'll turn it over to the Director of the Office of Broadband, Dr. Holmes.
And so I'll go ahead and call Caroline Buxley up to go ahead and start our official presentation this morning. Caroline is the program manager for all things broadband deployment.
Okay, good morning. Everyone hear me okay? Okay. So like Tamara said, I'm Caroline Buckley, and I'm the program manager for the VADI program within the Office of Broadband. Okay, so before I start, within the Office of Broadband, and it's simply a location. So a home, a business, or a community anchor institution, and in our terms, that will be served. So that will be connected. So I'm using the term passing now that we've established that, should be good to go. So last time I presented to this council in August, I presented the same slide. However, this is updated data. So this is a look at our FY 21, 22, and 23 VADI projects and how they are progressing in terms of project passings. Most notably, the difference between this one and the last time I presented, our FY 2022 projects have seen an increase of about 12,000. Again, this is that funding year that has a strict spending deadline of December 31st, 26. So the fact that they are continuing to progress is very good news. FY 23, our latest round that is under contract, we have had our FY 24. They largely are not under contract yet. We're still working through that. So with FY 23, they are starting to really pick up. So they've had an increase of about 1,200 passings since August. So again, this is once again looking at the passings. This is FY 21 through 23 again. So if we look at the very first month, that's when our FY 21 awards were awarded. So if you look out about a year from that, you can see that since that time, So one item from the 24th legislative session this year was to take our VATI performance report that was previously an annual requirement and make that a quarterly requirement. So now we're reporting on how our projects are doing on a quarterly basis. The first of these quarterly requirements was due at the end of October. We have submitted that first quarterly requirement. Some metrics that are included in this report are number of passings, grant dollars expended from funding source, so either state general funds or ARPA dollars, contract performance period, the progress of these projects, maximum advertised speeds, and then the milestones that they have achieved. Shannon.
I'll put this file up for 1 second. Make sure the folks online can see the screen that's being shared. Can we have confirmation from folks online that they can now see the slides through Teams?
Yes, we can see them.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so partly in response to this new quarterly performance report requirement, we added additional requirements in our VATI monthly report. The VATI grantees have to report to us monthly on their project progression and their expenditures. But now we've added in additional requirements specifically regarding project risk and the delays that are causing those risks to the project. So our first monthly report that had these new requirements was just last month in November. So we've had only one round of data so far. But out of the 28 projects that reported having been determined to be at risk by DHCD, and then therefore were required to report on their project delays, we have the data on the left here. You can see largely the delays that they are reporting are make ready, followed by railroads, and then we have that other category. And when you dig down deeper into the other category, these folks are mostly reporting trouble accessing private easements, land agreements. We had a couple that were dealing with Hurricane Helene damages, and then we had a couple projects that were rescoped. So out of that process, they just naturally had to adjust their timelines. Okay, another 2024 legislative item was the establishment of the Virginia Mix. So this is a $30 million program specifically for eligible FY 2022 VATI projects and specifically for make-ready costs. A FY 2022 VATI project is eligible if they have been determined to be at risk of not meeting that December 31st deadline, again, determined by DHCD. Some stipulations of this program, no more than $30,000 per month may be awarded for pole replacements, mid-span installations, and undergrounding. The program must be up and running by September 24. We did that, and funds must be expended by June 30th, 2025 by the grantee. So I won't read out all of these numbers to you all, but like I said, we kicked off in September. That was our first DMRI round. We had additional rounds in October, November, and then our application deadline for December was yesterday. The funds keep rolling over to the next month. So for December, we have just under $11 million available. And as you can see, each month has increasingly gotten larger. So again, the applications for December were due yesterday. We'll be reviewing those within the next week and then making the award. So just to take a moment to break down some of these awards so far. This is a look at the VMRI awards per grantee. The number you see in parentheses there are the number of applications they have been awarded. So for instance, Campbell County submitted 8 applications, they were awarded 8 projects. So largely Culpeper County, followed by Hanover, Bedford, and Shenandoah. So digging further into it, we've had 4 ISPs seek out the VMRI funds. In blue here, we have the award amount that's been awarded to each ISP, and then in orange are the matching funds that they are contributing. And then this is just a look at the funds for fiber deployment types, so either underground or aerial. Again, they can use the funds to either divert the make-ready cost entirely and go underground, or for the additional pole installations. And then finally, this is just average award per mile. So the average award per mile is currently around $17,000 per mile. And that's it for my part. Are there any questions?
Question. The slide before where it was showing the county breakdown on the per mile, why was Culpeper so much more?
Yeah.
So the question for the folks online, perhaps if they couldn't hear it, was, you can see the average here is between $17,000 and $18,000 per mile. Why is Culpeper County significantly higher out of that average cost per mile? Culpeper County has seen the most percentage of undergrounding out of any county that's received applications under the Make Ready initiative. So the majority of projects in Culpeper County are all underground, vast majority, and that's why you see that cost reflected close to $30,000 per mile, because if you'll recount from this past General Assembly session, the maximum we could award per mile of undergrounding or aerial cost was $30,000.
Thank you.
Caroline, I'm wondering if this is really helping the ISPs to get the work done, seeing that we had such a backlog with certain projects. Is this making a difference?
I think from our perspective, it's too soon to say. Our September awards have just now started getting under contract for that VMRI. So we don't have any monthly report data yet for any of these projects.
Thank you.
They do have a 120-day shot clock on these funds, so we should know quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question, can we entertain questions online from board members, perhaps Senator?
Absolutely.
Are there any questions online? Specifically from board members?
Madam Chair, wonderful. So the graph earlier, that showed the kind of the barriers, Make Ready was the number one, and railroads were right behind that. So how often can we expect that graph to be updated? It would seem like maybe that number of 17 would go down in the future.
Yeah, so again, that information comes from our new monthly report. So we'll get new data every month.
Okay.
And we can update it as soon as monthly.
Seems like that'd be a great way to see how well this is working.
That's certainly the hope. In addition to them having to select what specifically their project delay was, if they have been determined to be at risk, they're now required to attach a whole nother form regarding specifically project delays. So that form really digs into numbers of railroad crossings, use the railroad owner, and pole attachments, how many poles are there. So we are collecting a lot more information regarding.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I believe we're going to turn it back over to Dr. Holmes for a couple of introductory remarks for the next portion of the presentation.
All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the deployment and where we are with that. So the last time we met in August, there have been a lot of moving parts that have happened related to BEAD deployment, so much so that we had a BEAD application workshop 2 days earlier this week with the internet providers that are interested in participating in BEAD. And so to just give you an update on BEAD, we did actually open our application process on December 1st. I know I'm jumping ahead. And so we're actually still in the process of finalizing our locations with NCIA. And so we still think we're about 131,000 locations are going to be eligible for the BEAD program. And so as we shared previously, those locations are scattered throughout both rural and urban communities across the state. Next slide, Janet. And so where we are now, we actually are on what we consider our new schedule, where a full application would open, and we're in late 2024 now, and so that officially opened on December 1st, the narrative portion. And then we're still on target of having awards announced by Governor Youngkin in spring of 2025 and getting those projects underway in 2026. And so you will see that there's a gap between when the awards will be announced and when we anticipate the projects will be underway. And part of that is because NTIA has to approve every single project that is recommended by Governor Youngkin. So there'll be time for that. Next slide. And so we officially closed our letter of intent on November 30th, and we did receive 46 letters of intent from providers that currently participate in body, but also providers that have not previously participated in body. Our 90-day full application window actually opened December 1st, and we still are waiting for approval of our BEAD locations. And so we did accelerate our opening of our application on December 1st to stay on our anticipated schedule, while also with the locations being pending. And so we thought internally, well, they have to fill out the narrative, so we'll go ahead and give the providers an opportunity to start the narrative portion of the application while we're anticipating approval of NPIA, which I strongly believe will be before the end of the year. And so, as you can see, based on the 46 letters of intent, we still garner a lot of interest in our broadband deployment efforts across the state. Next slide. And so to kind of share with you some of the statistics behind the letters of intent, they range from a wide range of technologies. As you all know, the Commonwealth is technology neutral. And so while a lot of our body investments have been primarily in fiber and hypercoax cable along with some fixed wireless, what you see in the letter of intent that we did receive through the BEAD program, we saw proposals from letters of fiber, satellite, and fixed wireless technologies as well as hybrid coax cable. And so what you also see based on this map, and as you'll see, every single locality did get a proposal. The number of letters of intent, based on the shading, the yellow received the highest number of letters of intent, which means that they might have received up to 20 letters of intent for their locality, where the darker shaded localities may have received between 7 and 10 ISPs interested. And so unlike body, where we would get one application from a county and their ISP partner, what you see through BEAD are multiple providers are interested in several counties across the state. There is geographic diversity in where they're seeking proposals. And then you can actually see a list of the internet providers on our agency website. So that information is publicly been posted this week. Does anyone have any questions regarding any of the letters of intent? Okay. And so just to kind of share BEAD at a glance, as you all may remember, our application areas, we were required through NCIA to set application areas. And the way we set those in the Commonwealth are around zip code tabulation areas and zip codes. And so what this slide here displays is 2 localities, both Spotsylvania and Roanoke. And the example in Spotsylvania is the zip code that is located within Spotsylvania County, which is zip code 22551. And so that's the largest number of locations in a zip code as an example. And then what you see in Roanoke County, which really, if you think about, we talk about high density and low density, you can actually see that graphically displayed on this map. Where if you look at the Roanoke example, which is zip code 24070, there are 96 locations on average within that particular zip code. And so you see not only the geographic diversity of where we saw letters of intent from, but what you also see is what providers will see on the ground as they're looking to submit applications. That you'll see some zip code tabulation areas that have more density, but then you'll also see some that have low density. And so, does anyone have any questions before I go to B non-deployment? Yeah, one question from
So
Steve Sandy.
when you look at the zip code tabulation areas, the application has to include serving all of those addresses within that specific zip code area.
Yes, and so the question was, does the provider have to, in their application, include all the locations in the zip code tabulation area, ZICTA? They do have to submit at least, they have to include at least 95% of the locations in a ZICTA in their application. If they submit more than 95%, they will receive additional points in the evaluation. Any questions online from our board members? Okay. All right, at this time, I will present on B non-deployment, and then I'll turn it over to Chandler. And so, we want to share with you what, we've heard of a lot about B deployment. And so, because the first priority under the B program is to make sure that we have universal coverage across the Commonwealth. And so Virginia, is one of, I want to say maybe two handful of states, not one hand, that will have the benefit of having additional dollars. And so because of significant investment in last mile deployment across the state since 2017, if you all remember, we said about 131,000 locations will be eligible for BEAD. We have built out over 135,000 locations over the last 2 years just through body. And that is not, and so we built more locations through body than we actually will have eligible through the BEAD program. And so I do want to give kudos to the team at DHCD and our partners who have been really successful in making sure that Virginians get access to broadband. And so we're one of two handfuls of states that will have an opportunity to utilize what folks are calling excess funds that won't go to deployment to address BEAD non-deployment issues. And so while we're closing the digital divide from an infrastructure standpoint, we'll be able to address other needs around the Commonwealth that are what we consider parallel to either right along the line of deployment or parallel to deployment. And so I get today to officially unveil what those priorities are for Governor Youngkin's administration. So next slide, Sharon. And I'm gonna do the next two and then turn it over to Chandler. And so what is BEAD non-deployment? And so as I said earlier, the first use of the funds is make sure everyone has access to broadband. And so last year, I won't say last session, because my sessions have been blending together since we started having special sessions out. And so last session, DHCD was authorized in the budget to look at the eligible uses of BEAD non-deployment funds. Those eligible uses are not dictated by the Commonwealth of Virginia. They are dictated by the federal government through the passing of the Infrastructure Investment Job Tax in the BEAD program. And so NTIA, as they are administering the BEAD deployment effort, they also are responsible for approving BEAD non-deployment proposals. And so we estimate that about $500 million of our $1.48 billion allocation through NTIA will be available for non-deployment. Well, that all depends on what our costs will be based on the bids that will come in through the BEAD non-deployment BEAD deployment, sorry, now I'm going non-deployment. And so what you see on this slide are the eligible uses of the BEAD non-deployment bucket of funding from NTIA. And so I won't go through the laundry list. They're on the slide and they're also in the packet. And so our allocation, as I said, is $1.48 billion. And so you'll see there's multiple uses of the funding, and I don't want to steal too much thunder. And so I'll let Chandler specifically go over each of our priorities under the BEAD non-deployment. And so the DHCD will be administering both the non-deployment and deployment funds from NTIA. And so we're going to share momentarily what those focus areas will be for the administration around non-deployment. And so with that, I will go ahead and introduce Chandler Bunker, who I'm going to give complete credit. He's going to get mad at me. Chandler has been the staff lead for all things BEAD, and also by way of that inherited what we have put together for BEAD non-deployment, which is why I have deferred to him to present one that I consider one of his special projects. Thank you, Chandler.
Well, thanks, Tamira. I want to highlight a couple of quick points that were mentioned in the previous comments as well, right? And for the Broadband Advisory Council members from your leadership at the General Assembly, Virginia is recognized as the #1 state in the nation in terms of broadband deployment. From the data we can find, we've built out 5 times more locations than any other state from state broadband deployment dollars than any other state across the country. And because of that, we're in a good position under the BEAD program to be able to not only finish the job on deployment for the last 131,000 locations, but also be able to invest these non-deployment dollars, which are available to states that can prove they can get the job done on deployment, which is still our number one priority too, but also look beyond just the broadband access component of the digital divide. So we've got 4 things we want to really debut today and kind of present as Governor Youngkin's priorities under the non-deployment funding. And then I think we do need to check first though online and make sure that people online are still up to date. We should see a slide right now with 11 blue circles in it. Got a thumbs up in the room for folks that are online that we can see those slides. So before we get into the approach, Ms. Mayor, let's go to the next slide.
Trying to get me to do this.
So before we get into the details of the 4 specific proposals that were pulled together for BEAD non-deployment funding, again, that we are going to propose to NTIA to utilize these non-deployment funds, I want to talk a little bit about our approach. The first is sustainability of funding. And it's really important to realize with BEAD money and BEAD non-deployment dollars specifically, these are one-time federal funds that we will not have the opportunity again to leverage in the Commonwealth. Not only is that the truth from deployment to get the last 131,000 locations that don't have broadband and don't have funding to get it there, but it's also true from this non-deployment angle, and especially true for non-deployment. So we want to talk about sustainability. And the example I refer to a lot here, and folks in the office have heard me beat this to death over the last 18 months now, is that we could go out and buy 100,000 Chromebooks or 100,000 laptops under this program. And unfortunately, those 100,000 laptops are going to age out in 3 to 4 years after we buy them. So, for example, if we do want to have a laptop program that provides laptops to those in need, right, it ought to be something that's sustainable, that we're actively refurbishing those laptops, getting partnerships from the private sector to donate refurbished computers and get them redistributed back out into the field. That's an example of sustainability, but our thought process around sustainability is across all of these programs. The second thing we want to emphasize under non-deployment is that the more infrastructure we can do, which I know is an oxymoron, non-deployment and infrastructure, but the more infrastructure we can do under non-deployment, the better. Those go hand in hand, right? The more infrastructure we can build, but naturally speaking, the more sustainable that these investments are going to be in the long term. So let's go to the next slide.
Head southwest.
I can mess with it.
Cooking. Oh.
Okay, let's go to the first one. The first one of these non-deployment initiatives that we want to emphasize development of over the next few months as we prepare a final proposal for NTIA's review is expanding cellular coverage. And I've had this conversation with my parents a few times that cell service, and we all know this in the room, but cell service is not broadband access, right? Broadband access and the work we've been doing for the last few years now is making sure folks have in-home internet connectivity. Expanding broadband access is not going to have a boost immediately to expanding cellular access across Virginia. So thank you for standing on my soapbox. I'm sure my dad is not listening to this recording, but now we can point him back to this place to make sure he understands the difference between broadband and cell coverage. We've been studying the data around cellular connectivity as well, in addition to broadband mapping. As folks know, in the last couple of years, broadband providers for the first time were required to submit location-level availability data to the National Broadband Map. Well, cell companies, to a degree, were required to do the same thing. So we've been looking at that data in the office, thanks to our GIS specialist and planner, Lonnie Hamilton. And what we found is that there are 9,200 locations being homes and businesses across Virginia, where you can't even make a phone call. Phone call through any cellular company, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, US Cellular, not going to go through. No cellular company offers broadband and offers cell service at that location for 9,200 homes in Virginia. There's another 45,000 out there where you can make a call or a text, but the data functionality on your phone essentially makes it a paperweight beyond just being able to send a call or a text. So that's by the numbers. we all know the benefits of cell service. Emergency services, number one, right? We want to make sure that folks, if they do need to call a rescue squad or an ambulance or fire department, do have the ability to make that phone call if needed, especially if they're outside their home. But also in terms of private sector advancement, acceleration, 5G, of course, wireless technology is going to be essential for the 21st century economy. So we want to highlight those benefits of the cellular deployment program, partnering with local governments as well, and we're happy to present the details or talk further with folks about what we see the nuts and bolts of this program being. But cellular expansion to folks that don't have coverage is the top priority for us under non-deployment dollars, but not the only priority. Let's go to the next slide so we can just talk through what those gaps look like across Virginia. For folks that have been doing this a long time, we know that broadband availability is primarily based on population density, right? If folks are living in dense, traditionally urban environments, there's likely broadband already available because we can market the case to extend service to those folks. Cell service essentially works the same way. If there's not enough folks to build a market case for a company to build out in an area, it's likely they don't have service. And there's some locations across Virginia that are so sparsely populated that there's no market case for any cellular company to come out and be able to extend service to those homes and businesses in that area. So in the red up here, you can see where those 9,200 homes are across the Commonwealth. 9,200 homes in those red areas, right? You probably think, looking at this map conceptually, there's more homes than that, just those areas. But in fact, no, thankfully, there's just those 9,200. Those red areas also involve a lot of unserved roadways that don't have cell service available on them. They also reflect a lot of unserved land areas. Folks that are traveling down the Appalachian Trail, folks that are enjoying national forest or state parks that don't have coverage available at those locations. Let's go into the next one. This is 2 out of 4 here. The next piece of the non-deployment investment proposals is multi-dwelling unit connectivity. Again, we've been working to expand broadband access through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. The VADI program has always made it eligible that folks can come in and identify apartment buildings that have multiple units in it to extend service into them. But they're extremely hard to map and identify, especially based on the rules of the new federal broadband mapping process. So to address that and make sure that folks, regardless of where they live, whether it's in an apartment building with 2 units, 4 units, 100 units, we want to build a program around making sure that folks in each individual unit have broadband quality speeds. We probably all have experience of a hotel wireless network where calls frequently drop, poor user experience because we're sharing that same wireless signal across the entire hotel with anybody else that's waking up and taking a Zoom call at 8 a.m. Unfortunately, the same experience is out there for some multi-dwelling units across Virginia, and building a program that addresses that, making sure that folks that live in those multi-dwelling units and apartment buildings, especially low-income housing, have the ability to connect and be in the 21st century, just like the rest of us that have broadband connectivity in our homes. So let's get into the third area of this. And the third area of this is really opening up the playbook for broadband adoption with other state agencies across Virginia. We partnered with the Guidehouse team, and I'm going to ask the Guidehouse folks to raise their hand and connect Colin and Carly there. They've been working with us to build a network of other state agencies across the Commonwealth that want to do broadband adoption programs in partnership with DHCD. So we've got some details on that in the next couple of slides. Tamara, let's go ahead and skip to those. This outlines the timeline that we're on, providing the slide for information for folks, but not going to dive into the presentation. Next slide. Where we see these state agency partnerships coalescing are around 7 key areas. So Tamara mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that there's 12 non-deployment allowable investments that are issued to us by NTIA. We boiled those down and really translated them into broadly understood topics that we're working with other agencies on to advance. Those are things like education and devices, smart farming and precision agriculture, digital opportunity in the outdoors, meaning working with state parks, facilities to boost connectivity, telehealth, digital navigators, digital literacy and accommodations, partnerships with those state agencies that are focused on individuals with disabilities, as well as cybersecurity. So looking at those focus areas, this is what the conversations have looked like to date so far. When we started these conversations, we literally started with an org chart of the Commonwealth of Virginia and brainstorming with folks within the department as well as folks across government. We're trying to identify any agency that may have any kind of role tangentially or directly in broadband adoption programs or could be involved in the broadband adoption initiative. Those conversations started with 29 different agencies. And in those spitball conversations with folks, we identified 120 potential projects that may come out of that in those 7 focus group areas that were on the previous slide. Naturally, we've whittled that down over time for folks that may not believe this is a good fit or may want to keep on proceeding with non-deployment broadband adoption project conversations. We had workshops with agencies to specifically define the outcomes of those proposals. That was whittled down to 18 agencies and 99 projects. We just had another round of review with folks based on what we see as a good fit with NTIA's guidance so far around non-deployment. And that's produced 28 projects across 15 different agencies that we're still in active conversations with to help move the needle on broadband adoption. So Tamara, can you go to the next slide? Here's what that portfolio of projects and partnerships with state agencies look like. Again, going back to those 7 different investment categories, the top 2 that we're moving down the road with other state agencies on, 2 of the top categories, education and devices, which has 7 projects, digital literacy and accommodations, another 7 projects in those areas. There's more here that are involved with other agencies. I won't dive into all of the specific partnerships today. I'm going to give a couple of model examples on the next slide. But we also want to highlight too, the investment portfolio so far, based on the workshops and the RFIs that we've circulated to agencies and received back from folks. As Tamara mentioned before, our cumulative budget for non-deployment funds we expect is going to be in the neighborhood of $500 million. So far, through the partnerships with other state agencies, assuming these projects get approved by NCIA and assuming the state agencies sign on with an MOU between us and DHCD, we have about $100 million in projects proposals right now. We're going to continue to work with other agencies to refine those, make sure they are fine-tuning their proposals, have direct outcomes for folks on the ground with the broadband adoption projects. The top investment areas, the top 3 there on the slides, precision agriculture, which I'm going to talk about a bit on the next slide as well. Telehealth, I know that's a focus, especially of folks through focus groups this past session, as well as coming into the current session with telehealth, and then digital literacy and accommodations. So I'll give a couple of examples of partnerships on the next slide. Let's briefly, before I get into the example partnerships, I want to talk about the scope of these proposals from those 19 different agencies. We've broken those down by different, what we call covered populations. This is a term out of the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act as well. Those covered populations are target populations under the Digital Equity Act, which is a separate program from BEAD, but related, and we're doing that work in the broadband office as well. Those covered populations here are broken out by the number of each covered population that we expect to reach through one of the broadband adoption partnerships with state agencies. Total, we see that coming together as 4.1 million Virginians that are going to be directly or indirectly impacted through one of these proposed partnerships with state agencies through BEAD non-deployment funds. That's across all cities and counties in Virginia. I think sometimes in having conversations with folks, we think that these investments around broadband adoption, BEAD non-deployment, are just going to tail the investments that have been made through the body program and BEAD deployment, but these are statewide investments that are meant to address broadband adoption broadly, not just in areas that we've recently built out broadband infrastructure to. Okay, now we're on the example slide. Two partnerships we want to share here. One's with the library system, one's with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'll start with the Cooperative Extension example through agriculture, business, and innovation. And again, this reflects conversations that have happened today. We've got to work with NCIA and Cooperative Extension to continue to refine these proposals as we move along. But for precision agriculture, what we envision there is kind of a 2-phase program. One is essentially a digital navigator for farmers, helping farmers understand how to utilize technology that will boost their production efficiency as well as lower their environmental impact in their operations. Combined with that, through those 5 folks that would be regional roles across Virginia, dually, we also see a cost share program coming together to help farmers afford precision agriculture technologies that can help them reduce their environmental impact, boost operational efficiency. That's one of the model examples of projects that are coming together on broadband adoption. The other is a more on-the-ground approach with the library systems. We continue to have conversations with libraries about how do we help folks be in the field as digital navigators. I think we've all had the experience, and I'll go back and make this personal again of, for example, what if grandkids give grandma an iPad for Christmas, but grandma has no idea how to use that iPad? She's probably gonna go to the local library to have somebody help figure out how to use that iPad that her grandkids just gave her for Christmas and expected her to be able to use. I don't know who did that, but certainly could never have been us. The library systems are in a unique role here because they're already that trusted community resource when it comes to literacy broadly and navigating. So we see libraries playing a role here in terms of establishing digital navigators at key points around Virginia that will then train the trainer of folks on the ground in local library branches to be that digital resource for folks coming in with a question. And an example I've provided about how to use an iPad, but also things about how to start an email account or how to set up a bank account online. Functions that we all know how to do on a day-to-day basis, but they may not be broadly known. And libraries can be that on-the-ground resource for folks to come in and tap into that knowledge and understand how to participate in the 21st century world. Yeah, next slide. Just want to briefly right here, this isn't the conclusion. We have number 4 coming up. Just want to briefly highlight here the folks that are helping coalesce state agencies. Again, the Guidehouse team we've been working with on this front to help understand where partnerships with state agencies may be and how we can fine tune those to be the most effective projects possible once we get them on the ground and approved through the BE final proposal. So next slide. Okay. 4 out of 4. Then I promise I'll be quiet for a discussion afterwards from council members. This is going to take a little bit to unpack, so bear with me. But after the BEAD program, there will still be locations that, for whatever reason, may still not have broadband access. We do have the body program and $10 million in funding in each fiscal year from 2025 to 2026 to help pick up these locations. But there are homes and businesses in deployment projects that we realized during the process of deployment can't be reached by the technology we planned to reach them with through that body project. One of the examples I'd like to highlight here is the example of private easements. For folks that may live down a dirt road or a lane, it's not a state maintained road, there's not a state easement on each side of that roadway, so we can't install fiber underground to those locations. So if one neighbor doesn't get along with the other neighbor that doesn't get along with another neighbor, we can't reach the person at the end of that dirt road that doesn't have a state easement on it. In those kind of instances, we need to kind of open up the playbook to be able to get multiple technologies or alternative technologies to those locations. That's one example here about how we can use a portion of BEAD non-deployment dollars for deployment function, but to backfill areas that we're not able to reach with the technology we planned for that location to receive. Other examples here are potentially locations that we missed in the mapping process under the BEAD program. We don't need to unpack the details about everything BEAD mapping related, but simply put, a computer program to not read every square-shaped rooftop in the country, especially when it's hid by a tree canopy. So we want to make sure that there's funds available after BEAD for instances like that, where we may have missed locations on the BEAD map that still don't have broadband access. That lines up as the 4th proposal that we have for non-deployment. This is what we see as the smallest role to play under BEAD non-deployment transparently. We don't see a big investment area in this topic, but we certainly do want to have that in our back pockets to utilize as we realize where those locations are in the process of deployment. Next slide. Okay, this is the roundup slide. Not going to read through all 4 of these, but do certainly want to park us here for a second, Madam Chair, if you're willing to take questions from the council.
Yeah. Thank you. First, thank you for all the work on this. This has been an enormous undertaking. You really clearly showed us that we have a real path to be the best in the country, as you said earlier, on broadband expansion. Are there questions from the members of the Broadband Advisory Council? Right?
I really like to have a lot more information on the cellular service proposals. To some degree, we still have some small telcos in the Commonwealth of Virginia. While we all may travel with our phones, sometimes you're in a territory with a small telco who's there for a purpose. And to some degree, we may be creating a competition with taxpayer dollars for the private sector. So I'd like to have more information in this space. And then secondly, on the multi-dwelling unit, I'd like to have some more information there because there are, in many cases, almost all cases, it's privately owned property who has engaged in a contract with a provider as well. So just more information. I'm not opposed to what the direction you're, but just more information that we maybe get and post to us.
And so, you want to read the question, the comment? Did you all hear Ray's comment on it? Okay, sorry, yes. And so Ray, actually, I will share that the multi-dwelling unit connectivity piece actually came out of conversations with a couple of your members. And so we had several conversations. I guess that started a couple of years ago. And so part of it was actually having unofficial conversations with some of your members around ADU connectivity. There have been some initiatives that some of them had actually done in other states that we were interested in learning more about. And so we can definitely share more details on that.
And speaking broadly as well, today is a starting point in terms of developing the fine-tuned details of those proposals as we prepare to submit in our final proposal to NTIA. What the development process looks like from here on out, especially in those three areas of cellular connectivity, multi-dwelling unit connectivity, and how to fix errors in deployment or location that can't be reached with the planned technology. Those three areas in particular are things that we're going to work with stakeholders on as we develop that final proposal to NTIA. As folks know in the room or maybe unfamiliar, we post that final proposal for a public comment period before we submit it on to NTIA for their final proposal, for our final approval as well. So we're following the track of our stakeholder engagement as we have in the past and in the Office of Broadband. Look forward to working with folks on those.
Other questions?
Specifically with regard to libraries, interested in learning more about that. I know those details might not be available yet, but you said one-to-one staffing or one-to-one assistance. I don't know exactly what the slide said, but any word yet on how those metrics are going to be calculated? Just thinking specifically about rural localities, we may have a disproportionate level of digital literacy issues, and you may require more assistance out there. Metrics may need to be different, and so interested in that today or whenever it's available.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. We're thinking through how to structure really the job description of those digital navigators. We know there's going to need to be folks that are there on hand to have that one-to-one technical assistance. But there's also going to need to be a skill set involved there to train the trainer so that they can train up an individual that can then be in a local library every day to be that resource for folks on the ground. Even with the level of funding we have under the BEAD non-deployment initiative, or believe we will have under the non-deployment initiative, there's certainly not enough to have one staffer in every library across Virginia. So we want to make sure that we're wise there about the individual level of interaction, but also train the trainer models as well. Another key thing to mention with BEAD as well, the non-deployment funds have the same performance period as the deployment funds. We've got 4 years to get this right, once we get our final proposal approved by NTIA and these projects under contract. So that's where the emphasis is coming from on infrastructure and sustainability, is because these funds do need to be returned back to the federal government 4 years if we have not used them for each one of these particular initiatives.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that I would encourage when you guys are looking at the cellular connectivity, when I was looking at the map on slide 27, and I'm looking at the picture, so it's a little smaller, but some of the counties that I would have expected for red aren't there. And I know that there's always mapping concerns, but that could also be attributed to the fact that, of course, when you get into some of the more rural areas, there are certain locations where folks have to go on their property to use their phone. And I don't know if that would be counted as served because there's some place in the backfield where they can go and make a phone call. But if we're trying to look at the piece from emergency services, that might be something to consider to ensure that we're looking at it from that perspective, where they can actually make the call from within their home.
That's a great point. I think the conversation about where areas are eligible to receive funding through this slated cellular deployment initiative is something that we can shop around as we develop that final proposal. We know it's not a one size fits all, and we've got to make sure to truth test the nationally available data as well, not just take that as the sole truth and fact. So we're working on that as well, and would appreciate input from Rural Center too.
But I think this is really great, so thank you.
Are there other questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
The delegate Srinivasan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question on the prior slide, the last point about for unmapped areas where it's difficult to get to using the low orbit satellites. Will that be a last option, because that technology seems to be improving? Would that be considered a last option, or would that be considered along on par with other technologies.
So Delegate, I'll give you two responses here. One is the response in the deployment side of things. The other is the response for the non-deployment side of things. For non-deployment, we expect to utilize satellite here on an equal playing field as any other technology. For this instance where we may realize locations can't be reached by a previously planned project. In the example of deployment, satellite will be on as well equal playing field. We expect to see satellite utilized, especially for the last 5% of locations across Virginia that won't be included in another proposal to receive service across an entire zip code. So utilizing satellite technology both in deployment and non-deployment, but there's a process to get there in both instances as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, just obviously I've been a big proponent for the cellular coverage, so I do appreciate that that's something you guys are looking to move forward with. And you kind of answered my question was about kind of stakeholder input in the process to kind of fine tune what the ultimate outcome looks like as far as, priority areas and kind of to Christie's point about certain areas may have a greater need than might be indicated on the maps. And so just throw out, I'd be more than happy, and I think there'd be many that would be happy to be part of a stakeholder kind of group to kind of help flush out those details in the future when you get there.
Any other questions online or in the membership? Well, thank you so much for that presentation. It's really interesting. We worked hard as a body to make sure that we had the right language in our budget, to meet these needs. So thank you very much for it.
Can we have one more slide for our? And so I did want to give an update. If you all remember at our August meeting, and if any of you were at VACO, which I know some of the folks online and some of the folks who know were at VACO, I probably have stated regarding our Virginia affordability and adoption planning grant program. And so I'm going to continue to beat the drum to get localities and or regional organizations to apply for this funding. This funding, we have about $3 million allocated in BEAD planning funds to help localities develop what we call adoption and affordability plans. And so it really looks at, I think, to your question, Mr. Gum, I got it, so he's calling Krishna. Krishna, that we also want to make sure that localities have an understanding of digital literacy needs within their community or digital resource needs in their community. So I just wanted to give an update on that. We have seen the uptick in applications for the program. We have currently 21 localities in active projects. We have applications with 3 pending organizations, and then the staff is steadily beating the drum and talking to 18 other localities. And so the goal is to make sure that every county and city through an individual planning grant or a regional planning grant is colored in on this map. Part of it is one, as the chairman talked about, BEAD non-deployment. As localities or regional organizations develop these plans, it can also help inform where potential BEAD non-deployment funds can be utilized. Because what Chandler talked about earlier is we're going to partner with other state agencies. They, in essence, are going to sub-grant some of these funds to organizations as well. And so the goal is to make sure that both through BEAD non-deployment funds, that some of these proposals and priorities that need to be developed through these plans would be eligible for that funding as well. In addition, we will be receiving $18.3 million in what is called Digital Equity Act funds. And so this planning process will also help communities identify potential projects for that funding, where we are actually in the process of, we have a community input session later this month, and then we will open our application, hopefully with approval with NCIA in the new year. And so the purpose of these funds, I did want to give you an update on how communities are doing and where we've seen an uptick in proposals, because we had talked about it last month as well. And so with that, do you have anyone from Resign that wants to speak about what's happening today?
The last items of the business.
Okay, great. I didn't want to make sure I didn't forget. But we do want to thank Resign for hosting us this morning and providing breakfast and ultimately providing lunch after the conclusion of today's council meeting. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Senator Boyce.
Thank you so much. Now is the time for our public comment. If there are individuals here who would like to
Did anyone sign up?
Madam Chair, not sure I did personally a great job of circulating the opportunity to sign up for the meeting, so, would ask that if folks would like to provide public comment in person, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I would just ask they raise a hand and we would put a 3-minute time limit on that per individual. Any individuals online interested in providing public comment up to 3 minutes? Madam Chair, no public
All
comment.
right, hearing none, I think that, we have a couple of things around new business. One is that, I've been the acting chair over the past year and a half. Kathy Byron was serving, and so we're gonna need to do an election next meeting. Also, in the past, we have taken a meeting in January to look at legislative initiatives that are coming before the General Assembly to further vet them and to discuss them. That was really helpful last year with the Make Ready bill. And so I would propose that we hold our next meeting in early January, right before the General Assembly session begins. So that would be the 6th or the 7th of January. Because none of us are busy. Okay. But is that something that other members think would be about a value?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, that's great. So other than that, we have no more further business.
I got it.
Right?
I was wondering, maybe helpful at one of our meetings, doesn't have to be next meeting, but maybe an update maybe from the Solicitor General's office, where we stand in the litigation with the railroads. It remains in federal court. There was also proceeding at the State Corporation Commission. And so I think it'd be helpful from the Solicitor General's office if that's possible. And also, I know I've asked staff to hear my woes, but of concerns with, as we have received so much grant money invested by taxpayers in the Commonwealth for the deployment of broadband, ostensibly to encourage internet service providers to go to places where it does not make economic sense, but for the investment. There is some concern that we are seeing some noise around other state agencies, other entities who are doing road projects, construction projects, and they are ostensibly destroying functional broadband that was built with taxpayer dollars. And but for that grant, it wouldn't be there. And it's being torn up and ostensibly thrown out. And this concern is now they're handing a bill to that internet service provider who said, I didn't want to go here in the first place, but for this grant. And so there is a concern, not only with state dollars, but this could be a looming issue with all this BEAD money coming down the pipe. And I know that Dr. Holmes has heard me with these concerns a lot and been trying to be very innovative in ways to find solutions. But I think it'd be helpful for us to talk about, and I'm not sure, policy changes may need to occur down the line at some point, not advocating for it this session, but there's a significant concern that we're using taxpayer dollars to go, then it can be dismantled. And a lot of frustration.
Thank you. That is a great concern. And I think that would be a great thing to put on.
And it may occur too, when if there's broadband in a rural community where, again, taxpayer dollars are built and a hurricane hits. I mean, what's happening there?
So what are we saying? Do we have examples of that actually happening, and then who is being held liable? Is it the companies?
Yes. And internet service providers are not public utilities. So, if a Dominion or AEP or has to move their infrastructure, they're able to go to the State Corporation Commission and get their costs recovered. Internet service providers don't have that capability. So, that's a challenge.
That is a challenge. Are there other things that people wanted to discuss or bring up before we adjourn? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
And the second here, the committee will rise. Thank you all so much and looking forward to lunch. Did you want to?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And that does conclude the Public Broadband Advisory Council meeting as we did just adjourn. So for the folks online, thank you for being here. You're released, I guess we could say. Desi, please do end the recording. For the folks that are still here in person, Breeze Line has graciously agreed to provide lunch for folks in attendance